Middle school teachers, what is the cringiest thing you've seen a student do? Story 1. There was always this kid that would go up to guys, shake their hands, and deeply sniff their necks. One day a teacher asked why he did this to guys, and all he said was, "If I did it to girls, it would be weird." To be fair, the kid had a point. Story 2. I once offered a boy a My Little Pony color by the number sheet, ran out of Super Mario. The boy's response, "Mister, I'm not gay, I'm a lesbian, I like girls." Well, duh. Story 3. Saw a student write "boy puss" on the whiteboard thinking nobody was looking. He's had enough 4chan for now, I think. Story 4. I was demonstrating convection, which included burning some newspaper. One kid piped up with, that smells like incest." He meant incense. They were too young to get it, but I nearly died trying not to laugh. Maybe the kid's siblings burned newspapers while they smashed. I was wondering where the cringe was because that was just little kids not knowing words. Then I read that comment and I was like, oh, there's the cringe, you effing people. Story 5. I had a classmate who had to give a presentation using PowerPoint. So there is a computer hooked up to a projector that is pointed at a screen that fills the wall. This guy sticks his USB with his presentation in the computer and it automatically loads the images he had on it in a gallery. He had a full folder of pictures of girls from his class he had downloaded from Facebook. That was kinda awkward. Story 6. I teach history and let my students do a PowerPoint presentation on the history of anything. Some kid did the history of furries. He came to class wearing his fursuit. I teach high school now. Story 7. A girl got herself off in class using the edge of the seat. Not discreet either, as many of her peers had a what the F look on their faces. This girl was sweating hard. Seriously, most uncomfortable office meeting and parent conference. Story 8. I got a student on Google search attempting to look me up. He spelled my name wrong, and my name is very common, so I wasn't worried. I sent him home since it was an after-school homework club, and then went through the rest of the history, which included boobs, naked women, Megan Fox nudes, Megan Fox panties. One of the other students in the class kind of picked up on what was happening and mentioned that he had also been kicked out of the public library for similar reasons. Once, a friend of mine described his quest as a kid breaking into puberty trying to figure out adult entertainment. He described how he would Google boobs and variable/equivalents and not get much. It was honestly the most relatable and funny story ever. He was telling it in a spiritual life class. Back when I was in school, the internet was still pretty new, and you really did only have to type in boobs and stuff. Then you had to wait 5 minutes for a picture to load. Good times. Story 9. I taught 4th grade last year, and I had a student who was 12 years old, middle school age, held back a few years. She always did very odd things to try to impress her classmates, but they were relatively tame until there was a line in the bathroom, then she took her pants off, squatted over the trash can, and peed. 4 or 5 girls came running out of the bathroom and told on her. Story 10. I work for a private school. This middle schooler recently started dating another one. The girl decided to come to school in a black leather miniskirt and black leather tank top combo. At recess, which I watch because it's a small school, she was dancing all around in front of her boyfriend and hanging off the fence a la stripper. It was hilarious and so cringy. I had a student from a conservative Muslim family wear white see-through sweatpants with a visible black thong on underneath. She brought the clothes to school and changed in the bathroom before class started. Story 11. Had an 8th grade girl pretend to pass out because she was upset. She got written up for screaming that another girl was a freaking bee in the middle of a science lesson. Then got upset when that other girl didn't also get in trouble for looking at her wrong. In the dean's office, she was so upset that she pretended to faint, complete with back of the palm on the forehead and dramatic exhale, and then laid on the floor until we were forced to call an ambulance. Before the ambulance came, Mom walked in. She worked right across the street and said, "Damn it, Jennifer, we're not doing this again." So evidently this was a regular occurrence around their house. At this point, the girl squinted her eyes open but refused to actually get up. When the squad got there, they checked her vitals and basically knew she was fine. They had to take her because we can't take chances with this stuff in schools. We all just kind of looked at each other and shrugged. So yeah, that was cringy. We get drug seekers who fake seizures a lot. This medic once told me about an ER doc who called him over to the doorway after bringing one in and says, "Watch this," before saying loud enough for the patient, who was faking a seizure right then, "I'm not sure if it's a real seizure because she didn't pee her pants." Right on cue, she pees herself. Dove to one story but two massive doses of cringe. Though I have to say, the back of the hand to the forehead before fainting, I appreciate the melodramatics. Story 12. Director of Technology here. I don't really have much to do with the kids of the school I work at, but I definitely have a cringe moment. Call down to the middle school from my office to debug a problem for a teacher. The classrooms in this building all have two doors. One door opens into the building hallways and the other opens to the outside. My office is across a field from the middle school, so I decided to just cut across the field and enter the side door to the classroom instead of going all the way around the field and entering the classroom from the hallway. Bear in mind that these outside doors are almost never used by anyone except for an occasional fire drill. I open the door and step in to see a room full of students facing away from me and toward their teacher. The student closest to me scrambles to click X on her browser, but not before I see a full-on, hardcore yaoi hentai. Did I mention I work at a Christian private school? She turns bright red, and with visibly trembling hands, she closes her laptop lid. I burst out laughing, which interrupted the class. The teacher looks to me in questioning confusion, and the students stare in silence. I casually walked over to her and said, loudly enough for the classroom to hear, "Let's not look at memes and Facebook jokes at school, guys." Her flushed red face contorted with fear suddenly relaxed. Her trembling hands stilled. I laughed again and went and debugged the wireless access point issue I was called down for. No point getting her expelled over hormonal changes and curiosity. Dude, you say that poor girl's existence. If people knew she found out about that and she got punished for it, she would have wanted to die. Good guy OP gets a huge thumbs up from the Mainly Facts guy. Don't embarrass teens if you truly don't have to. Well done. Story 13. We had a student who started going to each class till he passed, leaning in the door and yelling, "Mom's spaghetti," and moving on. Bet that made everyone a bit nervous. Story 14. Valentine's Day, and a boy brings a girl a dozen roses. They were both in my homeroom, so I watched this all go down right in front of me. I'd literally never seen these two have a conversation before either. Girl didn't know what to do with roses at 7 a.m., so she threw the roses in the trash can literally 20 seconds after it happened and went on her merry way. The boy never found out. Story 15. We had this one kid in our 8th grade class stick his entire hand in a cake that was being passed around for a party, grab a chunk, and start eating it like a Neanderthal. It was chocolate, and his face was covered. When he finished his chunk of cake with everyone looking in disgust, he then proceeded to lick every finger. It was torture watching. He also ended up being the kid that threatened to blow up the school at the end of the year. Story 16. I had a kid carve his own name on his desk, but he couldn't figure out how we caught him. So what you're saying is that I should carve other kids' names into the desks? Story 17. Around the 8th grade dance season, they call it prom, there's a whole lot of cringiness roaming the halls. One popular tactic among the boys was explained to me. We ask the girls to prom, and then we run away so she can't say no. Tax Temple. I swear to God, if any of you do this, you deserve the disappointment that will follow it. Also, don't make a huge show out of asking, like on TV shows and movies. Just act like a human. Story 18. My husband teaches English at a middle school. He brought some creative writing assignments home to grade, and since I'm an assistant teacher for much younger humans, kindergarten, he drafted me into helping him sort through the mess and grade them. We've made good progress through the stack when I pick up a paper that had a kiss mark near the name in lipstick. Okay, that's odd, but I'm used to working with kids who are only just figuring out bathroom habits. A little lipstick on a report day is hardly weird in my book, plus middle school. Then I see the name. Hun, who is R? Husband without missing a beat. R is this goth kid who looks like a rainbow threw up on him after having marathon intercourse with a unicorn. I looked back at the kiss mark. Glitter lipstick. Nice shade choice if the kid is going for goth pale. I read his creative writing assignment. I get up halfway through to go pour myself more wine. It's extremely well-written, gay, adult erotica featuring my husband and another teacher at the school. The kid is going places. I don't know what those places are, but he's going places. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 19. I had a student who would constantly butt into people's conversations, and when they asked him to mind his own business, he'd stand up and proclaim, "Nobody likes me, everyone thinks I'm so annoying, ha ha." And he'd laugh while everyone awkwardly stared at him. Another kid literally told me one time that he would just act annoying so that he could impress a certain group of boys. They were not impressed. Well, at least he's honest with himself. Story 20. I had a 6th grader lick a book. He definitely tried to keep it on the down low, so he looked around, made sure no one was looking in his direction, and then licked to the book. It was a tongue poke, then a full-out lick up the spine of the book. Story 21. My mom is a middle school English teacher. Once a student snuck a bar of soap into her class, ate it, then proceeded to run out of the classroom and start vomiting. Apparently, he did it to impress his friends. Story 22. One of the kids responded to questions like Pikachu. Shame that a good kid is going to look back on those days with absolute horror. Joke's on you, she never let anyone stop her from reaching her dreams, and now she's a Raichu. What? I'm sorry, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. She would answer questions by just saying like Pika Pika and crap? I'm actually upset by this. I might go get a drink. I'll be back after I grab a nice spiked apple cider or something. Whoa. Story 23. Not a student in particular, but a whole bunch of them. I was a substitute teacher for a few years on my university breaks, but last January was the worst middle school day I've ever had. 8th grade science class. I asked the kids to open their textbooks and work on the assignment. A girl shyly raises her hand and says, "Miss, there's something inappropriate in my book." Of course, some kid drew a dong. I calmly tell her to erase it and move on. 3 more kids say the same thing. I say, if you have something inappropriate in your book, please just erase it. Every kid starts whining about how there's dongs in their books. Since they won't shut up about it, I take the offending books and replace them with different books from the back of the room. Every single book had a huge dong drawn in it. All 90-something of them. Crudely drawn dongs, artistic dongs, Squidward fricking SpongeBob. You name it, it was there. The kids rioted. I almost quit. Story 24. I once confiscated what I first thought was a note being passed in class, but turned out to be a gay fanfic one of my students wrote pairing 2 of her classmates. Story 25. I will relay a short story that my 7th grade bio teacher told us. In that class, we dissected a cow eyeball. The year before us, a student pocketed the lens of the eye, looks like a yellowish hard thing about the size of a peanut M&M. In his next class, he stood up and swallowed it in front of everyone. Another teacher told me about a student he had who would come into school in different costumes, ninja, soldier, etc., and stay in character the whole day. I do not remember the details, but there was an incident in which he threw throwing stars during a talent show. Story 26. In 6th grade science class, our teacher asked if anyone knew what the arms of an octopus were called, and this kid immediately raised his hand and blurted out, "Testicles." Everyone was laughing, including the teacher, who also snorted. His face was so red. I mean, to be fair, one of the octopus's arms is actually its reproductive organ, I think, so I mean, kind of correct? Maybe? I don't know. Story 27. Kids wore clothes to school with the price tag sticking out. When asked why, I was informed that it was to let everyone know he was wearing new clothes. You should tell them that it doesn't really count unless you staple the sales slip to the front of your shirt. Story 28. Not me, thank God, but my stepmom caught a kid jacking off during class. I'm having a flashback of the time I was in middle school and we were watching a movie in science and it's completely dark in the room. I decide to scan the room to see who's actually paying attention, barely anyone, only to see the weird kid with his hand in his pants staring at the science teacher. Story 29. One student wanted to ask me if I had a doppelganger. What he actually said was, "Do you have a dingleberry?" I also had a girl ask me what food stamps were, which isn't surprising because the district is very affluent. I explained, but she still seemed confused, so she asked what it means to blow a trucker for food stamps. Evidently, she was reading a book meant for a more mature audience, and her worldly knowledge hadn't caught up to her reading level yet. Story 30. They were talking about dank memes, which were about band class, by the way. I was told, Mrs. Confuzzledeb, don't look up dank memes, okay? I told them that I had been on the internet since before they were born. I was born into dankness. I was molded by it. You merely adopted the dankness. By the time you found me, I was already a man. Story 31. There was the student who had his hands in his pants, moving his hand up and down almost to a rhythm. That was cringy. I just stared at him in the eye till he noticed that I knew, and then he stopped. I had one of those. He wasn't allowed to wear pants or shorts with elastic waistbands after a while. All of these teachers finding students yanking their dongs, I'm not sure I would call that cringy. I would call that creepy as hell. Story 32. I organized an activity that was sort of like Never Have I Ever, but positive and meant to build empathy. Basically, a student would say, "You're in my boat, F," and whatever they say that is the same as you have to stand up and find another chair. Great activity. One of the girls, who I often found puzzling because she just did and said things that were nonsensical, started her period and got blood all over multiple chairs. Some kids started looking at the seats and have no idea what's going on. The girls in the class figure it out but don't say anything. They just avoid said tainted chairs. The boys, however, are as dumb as a box of rocks and are touching it and sitting in the seats. I'm sitting there horrified since 1, that's disgusting, 2, I didn't initially know who was pulling a carry, and 3, how the heck do I nonchalantly stop the activity to get this biohazard cleaned up and no one really notices? After a short observation of the students, I noticed that the one girl was the unfortunate cause of all this. I told her that she was to do a favor for me, and I stepped outside. I asked her if she knew that she started her period, and she said yes. I sent her to the office and then went back to the room for damage control. I honestly don't know how I concocted a magical excuse, but I told all the kids that we were invited to go to the library for silent reading time, but had to go now because all the good squishy seats would be taken if they didn't hustle. They believed me, and I set them down there. A few girls stayed behind to figure out what happened, and I told them I knew and sent them as well. I finally get on the phone and inform the unfortunate janitor about the bloodbath in my room. When I had my period at school, I was constantly paranoid about standing up and there being blood all over my chair. It happening while playing some kind of weird musical chairs is like some horrific nightmare. Huge kudos to that teacher for handling it that well. That poor girl might have been embarrassed and teased about that for years. Good job. Story 33. Not sure if this counts. Had a student projectile vomit in the middle of class. This is in middle school. Poor girl sat in the middle of the room. Vomit managed to get into the seats next to it, in front of, and behind her own somehow. So much barf and so much shame in that little girl. But then she didn't want to go to the office. She just wiped off her mouth and wanted to stay. Story 34. This student spent an entire semester speaking in a Russian accent for an experiment. No one questioned him. First day back from winter break, he is back to talking normally. We were all incredibly confused, and his parents ended up going to the superintendent about our school allowing bullying. A Korean guy in my high school randomly started talking in a British accent around junior year and kept it up until graduation. Sometimes he would talk in his normal voice. Story 35. I teach 8th grade. This student had talked to me previously in private about how the girl he liked was in my class the same period he was. He said that they'd almost dated when they were both at their previous school before transferring to the one where I teach. On top of that, all of the other students were aware that he had a major crush on this girl. So one day he finished his classwork early, and apparently he just couldn't take the hormones raging inside of him anymore. He blurts out loud enough for everyone in class to hear, "Look, girl's name, are you gonna date me or what?" I pretend to work through this while cringing so hard on the inside. I see every other student in the room work through this, from shock to laughter to pure amazement and curiosity as both why he would choose this moment and what on earth her response would be. The girl very politely said, "I'm just not looking for a relationship right now. Thanks for asking though." Oh, that made me feel great. Oh, the Schadenfreude. I mean, that poor kid, but wow. Story 36. Former middle school teacher here. During state testing, I had a student who wet his pants but didn't say anything, so he sat in a puddle of his own pee for several hours. Story 37. Had a kid who legitimately believed he was a Sith, like from Star Wars. His helicopter mom would come flying down to the school crying religious discrimination if you told him otherwise. He would relax his throat and talk in a deep voice and say it was his real voice, but he disguised his voice to not scare his human brethren. On free days, he'd wear old denim outfits with high waters and denim vest over a denim shirt. I had him for science, so he'd blurt out things about alchemy from an anime he was into whenever we were working with the periodic table. He also had a girlfriend who lived in Mexico who was also his cousin. Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. In those days, we really believed that to be the world's one and only truth. This kid gave so much cringe, and in return, we gained just as much laughter. Story 38. A bunch of kids brought collared shirts so they could pop them like Nick Crompton. Story 39. After 10 years of middle school, I should have had a novel's worth. However, so many years of middle school decimates your brain, and as someone else said, middle schoolers are generally cringe most of the time. The kid who wrote Mrs. Sharpenat loves cookies on the board when he sincerely meant to write cookies definitely ranks high up there though. We all cringed that day. I agree with the desensitization that comes with being a middle school teacher. I've taught 8th grade for 10 years. I really don't have one cringe moment that stands out. They just become part of normal life in an 8th grade classroom. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.